Today I'm going to be talking about a principle that has guided a lot of the success in my life, at least how I measure success, because pushing outside of our comfort zone is obviously where growth happens. Peace. Most people will push themselves so far outside of their comfort zone that they either burn out or get injured. I've done a lot of athletic training, and that's where we see the injuries happen. I've done a lot of entrepreneurship work related efforts that lead to burnout, and finding the right balance between the effort and the recuperation, and how much to effort and how often to effort and where to apply that effort is crucial. So in my visualization, my meditation this morning, this image that I shared earlier on my story is what came to mind. And I've talked about 10% outside your comfort zone in almost every setting of my life for as long as I can remember, because it finally was the sweet spot for me. This 10% rule came from performance training when I was working with USA Water Polo, and we were looking at how do we strengthen the pattern of a throw, because they're throwing a water polo ball, so they use a lot of different muscles than someone who throws a baseball or a smaller item. And so being able to strengthen that pattern, I found research that showed that if you load someone's pattern, their motor pattern, 10% outside of the forces that they would use when they just perform the task, then it will be strengthening the proper muscle sequence. If you add a load, like in a resistance band or something, that is more than 10% of the load they would use when they naturally perform the task, then it would change the motor pattern. They would basically compensate their pattern in a way that makes them stronger to do the load, but it would take away from the smoothness of the motion. This was an aha moment for me, because I recognized that when I'm in my comfort zone, something is very easy for me, which means I can perform that task with ease. When it becomes in my discomfort zone or outside of my comfort zone, what it is that's uncomfortable is the tension that's in my body that's making me distracted from the task at hand. So it becomes more challenging to accomplish it, because it's not just my natural state and I'm just doing the work. Now I have to perform the job in the face of tension. So high pressure situations, high risk conversations, high stakes. The tension in our body is what makes us uneasy in those situations. When it's more than 10% outside of our comfort zone, now there's so much tension involved that we can no longer simply perform the tasks like we would when it was easy. And this is why high-level athletes get paid so much, because they're doing something that, from a pressure standpoint, from a subjective perception, there's so much at stake that there should be so much tension. The fact that they can still perform what looks like easy work in those stakes is impressive. So for us, day to day, when we look at this, I want to start with a little center circle here, and I want to start with a very broad circle way out wide like this. And anything outside of the big circle we'll call death. This is so far outside of your comfort zone that you're literally going to be dying. And in this zone here, we have from this line out is our discomfort zone. Inside here, we have our comfort zone. But if you go too far into your comfort zone, we're also going to call this death. Because you just are so comfortable that you're in a comatose, and your body will atrophy until it has no reason to continue to maintain you as a living organism. So if you are so far outside of your comfort zone, the sweet spot is here. 10% outside of that comfort zone. Okay, we'll call that 10%. That's the sweet spot. Anything outside of that, now we're getting into zones of trauma. And we separate that from micro trauma and macro trauma. And just before you get to the point where your body is literally broken down to the point it can no longer survive and you're at death, there is also a zone right before that where we would consider this to be irreparable damage. Okay, if you cut your leg off, you're not going to grow another leg, but you're probably not going to die. But that leg's not going to heal. So now this is where we get into these different levels of how much the body can withstand and the fact that stress is required for growth. But timelines are so important, and where we are in our year, in our life, and our goals, this is where we begin. We are in our comfort zone. We are learning how to do something until it's second nature. You learn to drive a car, and at first you are 10% outside your comfort zone, just trying to figure out where the ignition is and where the gas pedal and the brake is, and then you start driving, and it's starting to get a little more tense. Now you're outside of that. You're in the discomfort zone. This is increased tension. And you're very aware you're going to pull onto the highway or the freeway, and you're so tense, and you're looking in all the mirrors and trying to remember where it's all happening so fast. That is very, very uncomfortable. That is borderline micro trauma. The reason it's a micro trauma is your brain is in such a vigilant state of fight and flight that it is perceiving this as very dangerous, and it will be creating a memory in your mind that will never forget this situation and storage of what's happening, how you're feeling. Anyone who learned how to drive a car remembers that first time because it was traumatic in that moment. Not so much of a micro trauma, not so much of a damage perspective, but the emotional intensity of the moment wires in to never forget this. And now that vigilance is in you the next time you approach that car. The next time you go to do it, you've been aware of it. So micro traumas like this, whether it's from a eating, moving, thinking, recuperation, or gathering, or community relationships, each of these areas you can experience that type of micro trauma. And if you stay in that 10% where you are experiencing these subtle micro traumas or these subtle vigilant moments of importance, things that you experience that are challenging but not so much that you're damaging your body, then you can do that and show up the next day and do it again. And that's why it's the sweet spot. Because say you do a workout today and you typically do a certain amount of workout and you don't get sore. Okay, that's where you've just been functioning inside your comfort zone. You didn't create any tissue damage at all. It was just moving your body like you would normally move in activities of daily living. But then you do a workout that you can feel the resistance. You start to use new motor patterns or new muscle fibers that break down. You're causing micro trauma. And that micro trauma can live right on the edge of that 10% to where the day after your workout, you're actually sore. Like muscles were torn down slightly. There's inflammation, there's a little bit of soreness and pain, but the next day you can show up to practice again if you're an athlete. You can show up to the gym again if you're trying to lose weight or gain muscle. You don't have to change the way you work out. You can do it again. That's the sweet spot of not having to take a day off. You just change which tissues you may be using, but you aren't going to have to traumatize yourself so much that you are at injury. So from a movement perspective, the macro traumas are the injurious forces that are dynamic overload on the tissues, and now you have to actually stop the movement. You have to stop working out because it was too much for you to be able to recuperate from and add load. This is where I think too many people get into trouble because they'll work out and they'll work out and they'll work out, but then they get injured and now they have to take time off and they get defeated. That cycles back to our nervous system that working out is potentially dangerous. So now when we're working out, our body is going to be a little more vigilant and aware, and it's not going to be as comfortable and rewarding. When we are on that sweet spot and we're working out and we have a little bit of a micro trauma to our tissues, we go home and sleep, we eat nutritious foods, and then we work out the next day and we win again, get sore in a different way. Now we are spiraling up. It's that ebb and that flow of going outside of your comfort zone, but then being able to recuperate quickly and then going right back out again. So you want to be ebbing and flowing between just comfortable enough and just uncomfortable enough to to where you, for the most part, are living in that 10% sweet spot. Again, this is the case for eating, because we invite people, for instance, in the Total Health program to go 10% outside their comfort zone with regarding their diet. Our first month is basically like a souped up Mediterranean diet, the core food plan. And then we jump into elimination, full elimination for a month. And this is very challenging for someone who's starting off, like drinking a liter of cola every single day. Like their 10% outside their comfort zone might just be to go a month with no soda. If that's where they're starting from, that could be a huge win and a life-changing experience for them, but they might already be outside of their comfort zone. If we're then saying, now go gluten-free and soy-free and dairy-free and corn-free, and like, all of that might take them so far that emotionally they are overwhelmed, and now they have to completely yo-yo back into a lifestyle that is not leading them in the direction that they want to go. So that's what we want, is to be ebbing and flowing. We're going to be in the learning curve of finding out what this is for us. In the movement, in the thinking, like when you're learning new things in school, oftentimes if you can study regularly and you drip, 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 you're going to hear and then you sleep and learn. You go and learn something new and then you sleep it off. But those people that come out, don't study at all, and then they binge and they go and try to get all of their studying way out at the discomfort zone here, when they have to recuperate from that, it's borderline trauma. And so they have to go all the way back, and that's where they end up, like at finals happen, and then they get sick because their body went into a fight or flight state and sympathetic dominance to be able to accomplish that high intensity load of trying to learn everything all at once, to where now it has to go hibernate on a couch for 3 days, then do all of its immune system boosting, so you end up getting sick for 2 days. And you have like a finals hangover from that, instead of that back and forth, more sustainable approach. On the recuperation side, again, if you're only sleeping enough to get you by, and then you have something that jumps in unexpectedly to where you're only getting 6 hours of sleep a night, and that's the minimum you need for your immune system to actually continue to function properly. If one night then you have to end up with 4 or 5 because your kid wakes up in the middle of the night, or work calls out and there's some problem, you have to be there in the middle of the night, you don't have a lot of bandwidth. And so if you've been functioning from very little sleep and every day you're coming out this far and not going back far enough into your comfort zone for full recuperation, it's just a recipe for disaster over time. You're spiraling downward. When you are only going back and forth here, you're building the habit of learning and being sensitive to where your sweet spot is, so you're on a constant drip of growth, not trying to accomplish the world and then do nothing, and accomplish the world and do nothing, because over time that leads to burnout. It's very challenging to go back and forth in that way, and you are causing trauma, especially if you're doing injury and then recuperate from the injury and then injury, because that comes with scar tissue. And emotionally, that also comes with emotional scar tissue. From a relationship side, if you keep screwing up in the relationship and breaking promises and then trying to repair them, and then breaking promises and trying to repair them, over time, that doesn't add up to quantifiable results. You're going to end up breaking someone's trust where now they feel fearful to continue to build with you. Most people will stay in relationships over a long period of time and be calling back traumas from the beginning of the relationship. So that same principle of 10% outside goes across the board for all the pillars of health. For me, if there's one takeaway for this, it's recognizing that when we expect others to see the world that we experience and to think like we think and do like we do, especially in health, we expect others to just live a healthy lifestyle without recognizing that where someone is starting from, where their edge is and where their sweet spot is perhaps in a completely different place than someone else. I have done elimination diets 7 or 8 years in a row now. Every year I just revamp and find out what is my body sensitive to now that I may not be able to perceive. And I know that there's something, because I'll get these little rashes on my hand if I just eat pizza or drink beer too often. And I got to find out, is it the gluten? Is it the glyphosate? Is it the sugar? Is it the lack of sleep because I'm a little bit processing the toxins in my body while I'm trying to sleep? Identifying that and building clarity every year is tuning my instrument so that the following year I'm more dialed in. When someone comes in, like people who come into the Total Health program, they come in from a background of never doing an elimination diet at all. And the thought of taking out bread that is connected to their culture, connected to their everyday habits, connected to their social life. They're addressing so many elements of discomfort that just considering decreasing the amount that they're having could be 10% outside their comfort zone. And it's so much more important to be processing and practicing the habit of building trust with yourself, making promises to yourself and following through on those promises. That is the skill set of lifelong health. When you trust yourself, then all you have to do is have a big enough why and connect your actions to your why. Make yourself promises that get you there in an acceptable timeline, and acknowledge that if you want to get there fast, it may be traumatic. And if you want to get there and stay there, the sweet spot is the goal. So having compassion for yourself when you're trying to form new habits, that going 10% outside your comfort zone is what will build the habit over the long term. If you do a 21-day challenge that's so freaking hard that you're living on this edge out here and you're like, God, just kill me before before I have to go another day without a beer or another day without a candy bar or whatever you're addicted to, that is really challenging. It's not going to last for the most part. People have said that 21-day challenges are a myth. You're not going to form a habit in 21 days. And I agree for the most part. The fastest habit ever formed was 21 days, according to the research that whole discussion was built on. But what I say is 21 days is the starting line. If you can make it 21 days, that first 3 weeks of neuroplastic change, of trying to figure out how to do something new, you start to enter that phase where your muscle system and the rest of your connective tissue starts to agree that this could be possible for you. You start tuning your body and your being to someone who could do that. And then you continue, and that's where you need support system and everything else. But think about that. If you have questions about it, or you want to add anything that you've experienced about from an athletic perspective, because I know I see some athletes out there, from a diet that you've tried and the first time was really challenging, the next time you try to remove something, it's way easier because you've already done some of that upfront work. Now your 10% floats forward, and that's why it's the sweet spot. It doesn't stay the same, and it's always your perception of 10%, which when you are resourced and rested and nourished, you have more bandwidth, you can push further. When you have experienced a trauma, I experienced a trauma last year in my family. It took a lot of our bandwidth emotionally just to stay connected with ourselves, to remember to stay connected with each other. And that made us have to pull back in other areas of our lives. Luckily, I had done the THP and I was eating really well and sleeping great. And that helped us, I think, heal from that experience as a family so quickly and deeply that it helped us hold space for the rest of the people that needed that. And that's really what we want to do with people, is help them recognize where their 10% is, to both have compassion for where they're coming from and where they want to go, and have the patience to get there over the long term instead of rushing it and then having to recuperate in ways back to old coping strategies. And also to have compassion for the other people in your life that may want to do better, but their better doesn't look like other people's better. And to give them permission to push themselves, to give them validation for the effort of trying to cause better change in their life. Because once we are all feeling more connected to ourselves, that's what allows us to hold space for other people. And that's really what we need in the world, is more people connected to themselves, so that then when they trust themselves and they're feeling enough, that they have more than enough to give to their communities. So I love you all. I'm going to be going, doing stuff like this every Wednesday for the next month, probably up until the Total Health Program launches June 9th. I'm just taking questions as they come in, and I'm going to be answering them as I can. I love you all the people that I see here. Thank you for being here. Let's keep the conversation going, and I know a lot of you have a lot to add, so feel free to jump in. Okay, talk to you soon. Peace out.